Sorry, Laura. Laura added in the chat, lol, I come in and first thing I hear is cat vomit. Hence why we call it zany. When you attend live, that stuff happens. That's what makes it fun. That's
okay,
genius.
cat story's over. Let's get on to
Excellent.
Nerdy West Coast Swing.
Welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing. I am one of your hosts, Cassie Winter, and Alicia Marshall is my co-host.
Hello.
Tonight's topic is frames and free arms. Oh my. Anyways, tonight's format is going to be slightly different for what we've been doing in past weeks. I'm going to give you links to 4 different videos all at once, and we want you to watch the first minute of like the first 3 and then the whole of the last one, because the last one's only about a minute long to begin with. So I'm going to drop all 4 links in the chat. Go ahead and go watch 1 minute of each video, and when you're done, come back and let us know in the chat. Do you want to do a little preamble before I start sharing my screen?
I can. We are talking about free arms and frames tonight. I'm just going to go over how they affect the connection and basically like the choices that you can make with them. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, and I think we like to shift away from like always this, always that, but instead thinking of these techniques as tools and why and when to use them as a proactive choice in your dancing. So, all right, now to click a lot of buttons. Share screen. Share the appropriate program. Optimize for video. Yes, share. Very cool. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Excellent. All right. So first video we're going to be doing some framing through of is the Lindsay Nastos and Chuck Brown.
So I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about was Lindsay tends to have a more fixed frame, at least in her connected arm. Like her free arm tends to not reflect that as much. So a lot of times if you have more of a fixed frame, you're going to see something that's a little bit more rigid with the free arm as well, which is not a bad thing. It's just because you have one arm that is a little bit more flexed or there's more tension in it, you're probably going to have more in the other as well. But with her, it's not so much the case, but she does have that, that more fixed frame. And you can see her arm is not bending and she's not like sinking into that elbow area necessarily. Like she's letting her arm stay there and just letting it move as a whole rather than having separate like forearm, upper arm.
Yep. And what that, as a tool, if you think about it from a partnership perspective, is it allows the leader more control over your movement as a follow. So Chuck is very much helping dictate Lindsay's shaping in this moment in particular.
Yeah.
All right, next section. So here we have a sugar push, and I want to talk about how Chuck tends to have a more fixed frame as a leader as well. So even though Lindsay has very long arms and they're about the same height, regardless of who he is leading, he tends to always swing his hands down in front of his hips on a sugar push, which creates this very downward line in the follow's arm. But because Lindsay is about his height, that makes it much more feasible. but it does create a bit of an acceleration in the follow because he is both leading her down the slot and towards the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So direction plus a change in elevation equals a acceleration.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times with that specific movement, when it comes to leads, you will see follows breaking at the waist and letting their upper body go really forward at an angle. And you can see it a little bit in her, but she's getting very close to him, so there's not that space for her to move like into an extreme angle.
Yeah. So she's taking height out with her legs, so her hips are closer to the ground. And that allows her to not have to bend over as much. But it is very common, and I know personally I used to do this a lot as a tall follow. I would keep my legs straight, and I would very much bend over and be almost directly on top of the hands.
Right.
Which is extra dangerous if your leader is wearing a baseball cap. I will say that. I once beamed myself into a leader's baseball cap so hard I had this little like credit card bruise in the center of my forehead. It's hilarious. Another thing I want to mention, how Lindsay is compensating. Because he is accelerating her, you can see she delays her weight transfer and swings her hips ahead of her upper body as she steps onto her one to help slow herself down. Because right here, she's very much pitched forward. But as she's driving forward onto her right foot, she lets her hips go faster than her upper body. Right. And she ends up pitched back just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to keep her on time as well.
Yeah. All right. Next section. I wanted to highlight this breakaway, and we know we only had you watch the first minute of the video, so after we're done tonight, feel free to go back and watch the rest of the videos. We just wanted to save a little time so we'd have enough time to talk about stuff. I wanted to talk about this breakaway and reconnect moment because the way Lindsay dances it is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's functional. Did I click it too many times? No. Okay, we're good. Do you want to talk about how she's kind of using her arms to initiate some of this movement?
Yeah, I mean, really that's one of the things that I was mentioning earlier where like her free arms are not necessarily fixed. So she's kind of letting her arms start something and then kind of letting the rest of her body follow that movement, right? And so you get that like tossing downward of the hand, which is bringing the upper body forward and sending the hips back. And so she's just kind of compensating by softening the knees, bending into them, and bringing that leg up just to get a little extra balance for her forward.
And I want to watch it one more time. Pay attention to Chuck, because I really appreciate how his right arm in particular, he brings his elbow in and then rotates his arm. So his hand creates a nice arc. Feels very Latin in style.
Yeah.
But it's a really simple and subtle way to be dancing with your free arm as a leader too.
Mm-hmm. And he also like synchronizes that with like a hip movement for emphasis. So as he's bringing that arm back forward, his hips are also moving back towards Lindsay.
All right, next section. Here's another breakaway.
We should maybe mention, for those that are watching the recording later, that maybe have not been in the community as long, Lindsay was a champion dancer. She hasn't been in the community for a while, but she was from Seattle. And she, I believe, had quite a bit of other like solo experience.
Mm-hmm. She went from first time competing in West Coast Swing to champion in a alarmingly short amount of time because of her
about a year
training. Yeah.
Anyways, just thought I should mention that for any newer dancers.
Yeah. Her classic partner was Joshua Sturgeon. So if you search for Lindsay Nastos and Joshua Sturgeon, you can see their two classic routines. Mm-hmm. Or maybe there were three. They're excellent.
Yes.
So here's a really good example of how Lindsay has a very variable frame when she's not attached to a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that made her so unique is how she could combine having a fixed frame and a variable frame depending on what she wanted to accomplish.
Right.
And then now let's check out what Chuck was doing, because this is one of the things that I appreciate about Chuck is he's not afraid to be very serious with his dancing and being very emotional with his movement and trying to make something really cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those moments where it's like he's almost leading her just with intention.
Yeah.
And they're both committing to this moment, and that's what makes it so special.
It's really nice. And two things to note. One, not on the topic that we're focusing on, but both of them, you can see throughout that little progression, they have some level changes going on, and they're going based off of each other. But then also talking about, their free arms, both of them have them at this moment. They're both extending from the shoulder. So we're not having like arms moving all together. There's a lot of elbow movement involved.
Yeah, both elbow and like a lot of initiating the movement from the core.
Mm-hmm.
So that way the arm styling is an organic extension of what the rest of the body is doing. Mm-hmm. Or the core is following through on what the arm is doing. It depends on where the initiation of the movement comes from. Mm-hmm. If it comes from a hand, you want it to go all the way up the arm and then affect the body. If it's coming from the body, you want it to go all the way through the arm to the hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a really nice moment. Shall we move on to our next video?
Sure. All right, so Thibaut and Estelle. The first thing I wanted to pay attention to, particularly with Thibaut, is how he very much has a variable frame as a leader. And he's constantly adjusting where he puts his arms and his hands to make it so his follow, in this case Estelle, can have a consistent frame, a more fixed frame, and it makes it so much easier to follow when a leader is adjusting to you and you don't have to adjust your frame. So I'm going to draw just a couple of lines. So I want you to pay attention to this section, how Thibaut very much keeps the frame within these two parallel lines to make it comfortable for her to have a more fixed frame to connect with him. And particularly when he brings the hands down here, he doesn't bring it lower than would be comfortable for her.
He has a very nice consistency with his arms. What I did want to note, he has more of a masculine styling with his free arm. And it's something that you can see because it is a little bit more angled. It's more intentional, and it's more focused on the shaping rather than like a continuation of something, right? He's wanting to have his arm in one place and have it in a certain like angle to have a certain look to it. And he focuses a little bit more on that, which is really nice because it helps him create, more of a masculine look with his dancing, because that's what he chooses to do.
Yeah. And another element that helps create that effect is he, even though right now his arm may appear relaxed, he has some tension in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what's creating that more masculine aesthetic to it.
Right. So you can see like his upper arm is like he's placing that very intentionally. And then from the elbow down, it's kind of dangling off and it's more relaxed, which is why it looks more relaxed.
All right, this is a small tangent, but this is a beautiful moment in this dance connection-wise that I wanted to highlight. And it's important to understand what is creating this moment, because what you see is Thibaut and Estelle's hands moving down towards the floor and them getting closer. Mm-hmm. But it's really important to know in an order of operations that the hands are able to lower because they're getting closer.
Right.
So the hands get lower after you create proximity. You don't lower the hands to create proximity.
Right.
It's a really important distinction. And that's the only way he is able to comfortably lower this hand connection here. And they're able to stay both very connected through this moment.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you are trying to lower to get closer together, it's going to create that angled upper body like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. From both sides, really. You're going to have that upper body more inward.
Yeah. So like you would be both upright with your upper bodies, but bent over to be able to hold hands.
Right. And that produces a lot of instability in the connection for both.
And it takes you off your center.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next section. This is another example of some excellent arm styling that is also masculine from Thibaut.
Yeah.
I love the way he prepped his arm back and then swung it through with like a staccato force.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite like he's punching, but very much the energy as if he were punching,
right.
but with the line of a dancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's using that shoulder to create that energy rather than like the lower part of his arm and hand.
So you can see how he's letting the arm resist behind him. And then he brings it through very quickly. And that's what creates the contrast.
Yeah. One thing I also wanted to know with him, so another thing that you have a choice on is what you're doing with your hand positioning. You can have more of an open hand position or more of a closed hand position, and he tends to have more of a closed hand position. And I mean, it kind of is coming from, he likes to do kind of some snaps with his hand specifically, like his free arm, but he kind of does that and then leaves it there. So it's in like a loose fist almost.
Yeah, you can see it in this frame.
Mm-hmm. And that helps create some extra tension in his arm to make that angular look more prominent.
All right, next section. I wanted to highlight this section because of how he follows through with his hand as he brings Estelle's left hand up, his own left hand up. He follows through with that motion.
Right.
And then he leaves his hand up for a prolonged period of time to create continuity and aesthetic.
Right. And he does it in a way that looks very intentional. There is certain things that you can do with your arms that will make them look more floppy, unintentional. But he's really letting that continue all the way through from his shoulder to his hand as he leaves it there. Like he's not releasing any of the tension with his arm. Like he's not just using his shoulder.
Yep. All right, one more section for this video. So I wanted to highlight this one because they're doing some great footwork together that is traveling laterally. And Thibaut is taking advantage of using his free arm to counterbalance his own movement.
Mm-hmm.
And he's accentuating it in order to make it look intentional. So it's both functional and aesthetic, what he's doing. And so as a leader, one of the very simple things you can start doing if arm styling is a little like too much for you right now is just think of using your free arm to counterbalance your movement. So do the equal and opposite of what the rest of the body is doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really simple way to start styling as a leader. And also it helps with your connection to your partner as well.
Right. And that's one of the times that he is having less of an intentional arm coming out of that. Like he has it right here, but as he lets it fall back, once it passes his body, oh, hey, Kate. But yes, it is. It's very graceful.
What's graceful? I can't see the chat.
Her arm is so graceful.
Yes, that was what I was about to talk about next.
Yeah. But yeah, so as his arm passes his body, he's kind of letting it relax a little bit more, and you can see more of an open hand position for him. And it's not quite as angled. He's not intentionally placing that elbow as much.
Yeah, instead he's more keeping a consistent frame with his right arm in order to counterbalance this anchor.
Yeah.
Right here. Creating stability in his right side is helping the connection in his left side.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to Estelle. I always enjoy watching her because she has such intention to what she's doing all the time. And the way her anchor ripples through her body right here and follows through and finishes in her arm as she's stepping forward
Mhm.
It's just so lovely.
Yeah. One thing with her is that she tends to use that free arm, especially like in her anchors. You will tend to see it like really far back away from her body because she's using it as a tool so that she can create more acceleration, or she allows it to, be prepped so that her lead can use that.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. On to Hugo and Chantel.
So, first thing to say about this, you'll see, looking more at Chantel, in comparison to Lindsay, she has a much more variable frame. And like with the video that we looked at from Lindsay, like you could really see that like straight arm that she had. In this video and just in Chantel's dancing in general, you won't necessarily see those straight arms unless it's part of like a styling. It's not necessarily part of her frame as much.
Right. I just wanted to highlight Hugo's frame through this moment. And he also has the loosed fist going on.
And with Chantel, her she chooses to have her hand positioning more open in general. And so you'll kind of see like her fingers, like they look a little bit more spread, like they're not all together necessarily, but they're just very relaxed.
I wanted to highlight this moment for Hugo because he's doing a very extreme level change, but he's adjusting his frame as he does it so that Chantel is feeling very comfortable.
And right here is a really good example of her open hand that you can see as she swings it through.
And she's also bending her arm as she goes into that connection, whereas what we saw with Lindsay Nastos earlier is she maintained a straight arm going into a low connection on a push break. So this is one of those things where like Chantel is making a conscious choice, like she's hitting compression, but then she's choosing to bend her arm in order to do something more with it than simply follow it.
Right. And I will say that variable frames in moments like these will allow for more natural movement out of it. If you're going to like follow through with your body, that is.
Yeah. Because there can be something, it can be easy to be robotic coming out of a shape like this if you had a straight arm.
Yeah.
All right, next section. Again, here you can see that Hugo is countering himself with his free arm. They get so much more airtime in slow-mo.
One thing I wanted to note here is that Chantel is like pinching her pants. And so because she has that like more open hand position, it like it's something different for her when she is bringing that in. Like that's what she's using to create more of a shape, is that like pinching. And you can see she comes out of that like flat hand against her. And it creates a lot more angle to look at. And with Chantel, something that you can really see in her arms is that follow through from shoulder all the way to the tips of the fingers. Right. So a lot of times something that you will see is maybe it'll start with the shoulder and it'll follow through, but it'll only follow through to the wrist. And that kind of will disconnect the line that you're making. So you want to make sure it follows all the way through from shoulder to fingertips.
If I jump ahead, I really enjoy how this is another moment of her having a variable frame.
Yeah.
So Hugo gets into a really interesting connection here,
Mm-hmm.
and she connects into it, but decides to move her shoulders up and down while she's still connected. So she's still following, but she's able to add to it because of her variable frame.
Mm-hmm. Right. She is creating Chin Chin in one spot specifically, so that she is still letting him lead her, but she can still have a lot of freedom to move in her own body.
So there was another example of how she was able to lift and lower her left shoulder through her anchor to get just some subtle, lovely styling.
One thing to note there is that you're getting that same visual of the straight arm that you do when there is a fixed frame involved, but it's only like that because of how far she is like away from her hand, right? So she has more length to move, but her arm isn't actually like fixed in place.
Mm-hmm. So here's a like really clear example of Hugo using his free arm to counterbalance himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he's looking to his left, his right arm is to his right. And as he leans to his right and looks to his right arm moves to the left, similar as his left leg to counterbalance that movement.
Mm-hmm.
So really simple, both functional and nice to look at.
Yeah, trying to make sure that you have equal weight on both sides of your body. So Chantel does this little hand styling right here where she like comes across and down. And if you're nice, she leaves her hand in, you know, that more open position that she likes to use. But then as she is like pressing it down into the floor, she chooses to have it flexed. And so that creates a nice shape and a nice angle for her.
Yep. And it does, overall, it did this very nice, like, S through the air. In general, like, if you want something to be more, like, elegant and smooth, you want to create arcs through the air.
Right.
Whereas if you want something to be a little bit more sharp and staccato, you have angles through the air.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something that is like in contrast right there, is because she is like the direction she's moving her arm is very smooth and she has that arc movement, but then at the end of it, she has that flexed hand.
Mm-hmm. I'll frame through it one more time and then we'll move on to the next video. Cool. All right, last video. KP and Lindsay. Lindsay Mistretta this time.
Yes. I forgot we had two.
So did I, until I was like going through it earlier. I was like, oh wait, we got two Lindsays tonight. Excellent.
I was looking at my notes and I was like, there's two different spellings. Why is there two different spellings?
It all makes sense now.
Differently. Anyways, so here we are focusing more on KP. He has a softer free arm and a softer kind of frame in general. And you can just kind of see, like, looking in comparison to T-Bolt, you can see like his elbow is not necessarily anywhere intentionally. He is placing his arm in a certain spot, right? But he's not doing it as to create like a specific shape or anything.
Yeah, it's much more relaxed to his side.
Right.
Whereas Tebow's was a little bit more out at an angle like that.
Right.
And this is me guessing that it's a conscious choice on KP's part because of how tall he is. It helps emphasize the length of his body by having a relaxed arm that's more vertical up and down.
Right.
If he were to widen it away from him like Tebow, it would have the effect of widening his body instead of lengthening it.
Right. Right. And he also, similarly to Chantel, has a more open hand position with his free arm. And that also helps it look more relaxed.
Here's another example of him using his free arm functionally. So he's prepping it back, kind of like Tebow did earlier, and bringing it through as he initiates his turn.
But unlike Tebow, he's not
using it to turn.
Right, and he's not necessarily using his elbow to move that. He's just kind of moving his arm as a whole.
Mm-hmm. It's much more gentle and relaxed.
Right.
And here. Here's another example of him using his free arm to counterbalance himself right there. To widen and ground himself before he turns.
Right, and it's hard to see, but he's hooking behind his foot.
Yeah, right here. His right hip is back away from us, and he's hooking behind.
Right, and so that shoulder is moving forward in space in relation to the rest of his body.
Yep. So this shoulder is closer to us than this hip. And this shoulder is further back than this hip. That'd be a funny thumbnail for the YouTube video this week. All right, last section, the one you've all been waiting for.
Is this my favorite arm styling?
Yep. All right, so
We have
he combs his hair.
Things. We have around the head, all the way to the shoulder, and across the body, and then sliding down.
And then he slaps his butt.
Yes.
Bam.
Nice ending.
Man, his arms are long. Like, I know his arms are long, but when you frame through it, damn. And like we joke, but I love seeing a leader
Yeah.
do more styling like this. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's not just one thing and then he's done. He's linking multiple things together and he's doing it in a way that is visually pleasing.
Yeah, and I love how Lindsay catches on to part 2 of his arm styling across the chest.
Mm-hmm.
And then she does it herself.
Yeah.
I'm having such intense hair envy for Lindsay right now.
She does have gorgeous hair.
Oh, damn. All right. Anything else you wanted to say about KP or Lindsay before I stop sharing screen?
I don't think so. I think that's
cool.
it.
Awesome. Any questions?
Before we wrap up, one thing I did want to know that we didn't necessarily call out in any of these videos, but is that you have some choices that will make a similar styling look different. And that's going to be the level at which you have your arm or your hand, right? So you can have something at hip level, you can have something more chest level, you can have something shoulder level, and then something more head level or like above head level, right? And so each of those is going to give something like a different look. So if you're going for like an angled arm, right, it's going to look different at your hip, at your like chest, at your shoulder, and above the head, right? All of it, it's having different angles. So it's providing a simple way to have some variation within your arm styling.
Right. Ooh, we got a question from, is it Dana or Dana? Dana. Okay, from Dana. Hi, is it possible to get access to the recording of this as I wasn't? Oh, yes. We have a YouTube channel.
Overall, I think like the main point here is that arm styling is something that can be very simple, but it does really change the look for your dance, right? You can do something like one way, but then change something slightly about it, and it has an entirely different look. It has an entirely different impact on the movement of the rest of your body, and on, even how you're affecting your partner sometimes.
And another thing I wanted to mention about general arm styling is not only just placement and angles, but also thinking about the speed and the amount of tension in your muscles as you're doing it. Because if you go fast with a lot of tension, that has one effect. If you go fast with very little tension, that has a different effect. And if you slow down and do, like, there are infinite combinations of like positioning, speed, tension, and then the overall intention behind those things. And not just in arm styling, but in all of your dancing. And so I know one of the things that is kind of like our foundation of what Alicia and I like to talk about and teach is empowering students to make conscious choices about the dancer that they want to be. So it's like, what do you enjoy and want to see out of your own dancing, and thinking less about like, what do the judges want to see,
Right.
and stop letting judges who are not you 100% dictate who you are as a dancer. Because there's a balance between the two. So
we all started this because it's something that we enjoy, right? So we don't want to, force ourselves to do something that we don't enjoy doing.
Yep. And it can be a really excellent way to get to know yourself better as a person throughout life. And dancing can really be a wonderful tool for exploration to become more yourself as you grow, not only as a dancer, but as a person in your life. It's like a really great thing that goes hand in hand. So are there any questions? We were keeping it lighter tonight because we just did like a super intense 3-part styling series. And next week we've got the wonderful Larissa Tingle joining us, our first guest host. We are so excited. Are there any questions on anything we've covered tonight? Yes, Emma.
Question. See, this is way more fun being on video. You can just raise your hand if you want to say something. So for Cassie and Alicia, you guys specifically, you guys are both super different dancers, I'd say. And obviously you've been doing things for a while. So how would you say you sort of found or first started to find like what styling you preferred? And did you have any things that you found that were like ticks that you're like, I don't like that? I'm just sort of because I think we all sort of have our own little arm styling journey.
Yes.
And I'm wondering about the basics of the two of you.
Ooh.
Good question.
That's a very good question. Do we want to keep it to arm styling, or do we want to go a little bit?
Well, how long do you want to be here?
Yeah.
Okay, I got time. The sun's still out. You can still see me.
Where I am. No, but like really, you guys are super different dancers. I'm sure you sort of have your default and your things you like and your things you don't like. And
well, this is funny because I think we're more alike than you might assume. And I actually have video evidence at this point. Just posted this video on our channel, I think earlier today, actually. So go ahead and like load it up in your browser and watch it when we're done, because it's just funny. There's this one point towards the end where Alicia and I do the exact same thing.
At the exact same time.
It's hilarious. So that's one of the interesting things of like when you both kind of dance from the same base technique, you tend to make similar choices. But that being said, yes, we are very different dancers. Do you want to go first, or?
I mean, I think for me, like my arm styling just tends to come from, more my background. And I tend to prefer, more contemporary dance in general. And so that tends to be more of the flowy and like, dragging across, like that type of thing. And so I think for me, just realizing that and then kind of trying to play around with that idea of, extending something rather than placing it, is just something that I, have used to develop my arm styling.
My arm styling journey is interesting. So I have like both the dancer part of me, but then there's I have really long arms and can easily injure people. For those of you who have never met me in person, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I have very long arms. As a follow, for me to like do an arm styling that generates from the body ends up feeling like a punch if someone's on the other end of that and connects with it. If anybody remembers Melina Bronson from Portland, I'm pretty sure the one time she bruised her ribs way back when was me. So one of the things that personally I try to be conscious of when I'm dancing is I don't ever want to hurt anyone. So like a lot of my arm styling is more in and close to my body as opposed to away, unless I'm really certain that I have the space for that. Right. And then more recently, I have really enjoyed arm styling that comes from my body. So I've been really refining my technique to allow my center to dance while I'm moving up and down the slot, regardless of what role I'm in, and then just letting that affect my arms. And because of my extensive solo background, my arms kind of just know what to do at the other end of that, so I don't have to think about my arms. I'm letting it come from my body. And then as for styling, what I really love, like my two personal favorite West Coast swing pros are Emmeline Rochefoy and Tori Zowie. Those are the two follows that I personally want to emulate in my own styling, because I really love lyrical hip hop, and I love shag, and I love Lindy, and just like the foundations of swing and lyrical hip hop. That's kind of like what I want to be. So that's kind of where I'm at personally in my dancing right now.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question. It's a really good question.
Great question. I think another thing to add is once you do find something that you are comfortable with, don't just stick to that, right? You should try and still play around with other things, try and find new ways to do things. And then, I think that that's something that is something you want to practice on your own. And then, when you get to a partner dance, social competition, whatever, you have, this large amount of things to choose from. And if there's something that is maybe a song you don't know as well, or something that, you don't personally connect with as well, you have some other things to play around with that would maybe connect more with the song, rather than, your own personal styling that you fall back to.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Learning new things is amazing in all different realms.
Yeah.
And then another thing I wanted to add is, like, at the end of the day, we do it because we enjoy it, like Alicia said earlier, and to always come back to, do I physically enjoy this movement in my body somatically? Because, like, if it looks amazing but it doesn't feel good every time you do it, don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, unless it's like a choreography and you have to do it.
Right.
But like, I want more people to come back to, it's like, does this feel good to do? Because that's one of the ways you can be more yourself, is by somatically enjoying your dancing.
Yeah. And on that same note, even with choreography, if you don't feel comfortable with something, take it out.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, like, I know I've personally done that in my routine. When I was at the Open, I literally changed a section the morning of because I didn't like it. So, don't be afraid to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to do something that looks nice for other people. Chris and I changed quite a bit in what we did, just because we didn't, feel like it fit us.
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't know that, and I love your guys' routine.
Yeah.
It is also on our YouTube channel.
Sure.
You can go check it out. Maybe one of these days I'll find the video of Rosie Thor and my Rising Star routine, and that will also be there. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
The recording of this will be up on the YouTube channel this Sunday, and we'll be back next week with Larissa Tingle. So that's going to be really fun, and we're going to be talking about filling space. So excited, and that was Larissa's idea. So that's going to be a really fun topic to talk about next week. And between now and then, if you have like specific questions on the topic of filling space, please don't hesitate to message us or post on our Facebook page, comment on the YouTube video. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
It always helps me remember to hit record. It's like, oh, Emma's here.
Yeah.
You don't know what'll happen.
What?
Oh, I was just reading through what you put for what does variable mean? Adjusting to the follow their leader.
Well done.
They
that
are
made sense at one point in time.
Look Like, I know what you're going for.
They're leading. There we go. An ing situation.
Just like last night when I messaged you, I was like, just ignore my grammar.
There you go. But you're unimpressed, okay. Last night, I was woken up to this sort of crunching sound. And my cat's not a super loud eater, and it's like in the other room and stuff. So evidently I had forgotten to clip the cat food bag closed. The guy had his face shoved into it in the middle of the night, hanging out.
We got our cats like new food dishes in theory to help like Oreo stop vomiting, and so they're kind of like raised up and at an angle so they're not on the floor. And they have this little reservoir where the food goes in, and the theory is that the cat reaches their paw into the reservoir and kind of paws out food into the shallower lip of the bowl and then eat from there. But of course Oreo, the one with the vomiting problem, just tries to shove his giant face into the reservoir. It's working well.
That's
okay. Next week's gonna be great, but I feel like Larissa might get sick of the two of you. Just a little bit. Like in the best way possible. And this. And that.
And that.
What about this?
Sometimes, I don't know about you, but when I have an idea or I want to like log a concept that I want to talk about, it just kind of projectile vomits out of my brain.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get it all down, let alone coherently.
With good grammar.
Yeah.
So other people can read it.
That. The other thing that happens is like I prepare so thoroughly that just by nature of preparing, it gets like into my brain. And then I find myself like doing my talking points before I've even read them. And then I go to read them and I'm like, well, I've already done that.
Yeah.
What do I do next? That's what happened to me on Tuesday when I was teaching JT swing team. I was like, oh, I already did all that. At least I'm consistent.
Yep.
I had like a really aggressive contemporary song stuck in my head earlier today. I forget what it was, but it was very like early 2010s West Coast swing contemporary. Just like beat you over the head kind of music.
Random.
None of that.
None of that.
That never happened.
That never happened. Remember Grenade?
No.
Mars?
No.
You're like, no.
I don't.
It didn't happen. No.
Revisionist history. Also, can I say I forgot about Lindsay, and she's so beautiful, and I can't believe I forgot about Lindsay. Anyway, yes.
I miss Lindsay Nastos
yeah.
so much. Yeah. And like searching, because we wanted to like do a video of her, and when you just try to search, there are not enough videos of her.
Yeah.
Just social dancing or because there are videos of her routines with Josh, but like there are not enough of her just dancing, and it's like so whooshy and so effortlessly whooshy, and it still has the texture of hair even though she's been dancing. That's the part I don't understand. My hair and sweat do not mix well at all. Kate says #drowned rat club. Yes. Proud member. Well, I guess depressed member. That's more accurate. I will go fetch that link while Alicia says more things. That's funny. In West Coast Swing, I've only really ever done my own choreography, performance-wise. So I'm just like, it's right from the beginning when you choreograph it yourself.
This is the most on time we've been in a while.
I know.
In terms of sticking to an hour.
I know. Snaps for us. Watch next week go like 2 hours long. Just the universe karma balancing it. Yeah. It was so exciting. She was so excited to say yes. I sent her because we did a couple of videos featuring her. And I sent him to her, and she's like, oh, I want to do this to every video. I'm like, yes, join us. And this time I was like, peel the vision open. Oh, she's doing it too. Yes.
So 2 weeks from now, tongue styling.
You can tell my brain only has like enough RAM for dance content right now because everything else doesn't make sense.
It's okay. The
I've
world's
got to whir up
ending.
the hard drive to get any other information.
Well, and here's the thing, when we all actually get back to seeing each other again and we can dance, we're going to be like, this is overwhelming. I think I'm just going to talk and not dance because I'm not sure if I can. That seems like a lot of stuff to do. That's a lot of mental processing.
Yep. Everybody's going to suddenly be an HSP. It's just like too much. They're overstimulated by everything in the world. Just like, and I'm like, yes, you finally know my pain. Let the awkward silence begin.
Yep.